Hi everyone, welcome to today's webinar, It's Spooky When the Colors Don't Match. Presenting today is Tim Mouw, our Applications Engineering and Technical Support Manager. I'm Robert Grotans, the Global Technical Marketing Manager, and I'll be moderating today's webinar. Just a few quick things to go over before we get started. Due to the number of people that are attending today's webinar, we will keep everyone muted. If you have any questions, please use the questions function on the GoToWebinar panel. Tim will have time to answer a couple of your questions at the end, but if we don't get to your question, we will follow up with you. Finally, this webinar will be recorded and you'll receive a link so that you can review the webinar at your convenience. So with that, I'll turn it over to Tim.
Thanks, Robert. Welcome, everyone. As you can tell by the opening screen, we're having a little fun today in addition to hopefully sharing some education. I don't know about where you are, but around here, there's all kinds of people wearing all kinds of weird and interesting clothing, and some of them have even dressed up for Halloween. So let's have some fun, but let's also talk about color matching and maybe some things we can do to help you when you're doing that. So let's move ahead. So first of all, I want to talk about what we need when we're going to do a color match. So our focus today is about we're assuming we've got to make a special color of ink because we're going to go print with that. So what do I need in order to do that? Well, first of all, I need a customer, right? And he's going to specify for me what color I need to match. And he might do something as difficult as say it's kind of a yellowish red color, which would be pretty impossible to match correctly, right? Or he may give me a Pantone number, right? He may send me some LAB numbers. He may send me a sample and say, here, just match the color of this monster on this sticker. Since we're sticking with Halloween, well, we're going to match a monster's color, right? So that's the red that I'm trying to match today. So now I, as a color matcher, need to take that and go do something with it. So I've got to create a standard because that's my target. That's what I'm going to go ahead and match to. And so we go about creating the standard in a couple of different ways, right? We can do it spectrally. So if the customer sent me that sample print, I could measure it with a spectrophotometer. And now I've obtained spectral data. And when we talk about spectral data, real quickly, we're just talking about what percentage of light reflected off of that object at various wavelengths. If we can gather that, then we can match that color. I may be able to retrieve it from a database, right? Maybe I already have this color stored somewhere in my data. I may be able to pull it out of Pantone Live. If the customer said, yeah, it was Pantone 201 I want you to match, I could access a database from Pantone of colors. I might even enter it manually where I'm literally going to type in 31 different percentages of reflectance data to create this and get a spectral foundation of this color to match. But I may also need to do it with LAB, where someone sends me, here I need an L value of this, an A of this, and a B of that. Okay, I'm going to enter those manually. Either way, in our software, we can enter manually that information. The scary part, a bit of the scary part about LAB is where did that data come from, right? That LAB number, did it come from a spectrophotometer? So someone measured it. It was originally spectral data that got me to LAB. Was it measured with a colorimeter, which just measures LAB essentially, and only gives me that and doesn't have spectral data? What illuminant observer is it tied to? All of that. So we're going to go down matching that color, our reddish, yellowish red color from our monster, if you will, both ways. So if we do it spectrally, okay, I'm going to take a measurement and I'm going to end up with a color swatch in my software. This is all coming from IFS ink formulation software. You can see that I'm using a D50 illuminant with a 2-degree observer value. I get that LAB data when I measure it. Now, I could have easily also created the exact same standard by typing in those L, A, and B numbers. So I end up with exactly the same standard. However, when I generate a formula to match the first one, the spectral, I'm going to get this formula, which has got a green shade blue, a magenta, and a red shade yellow in it, along with some opaque white. And when I match that one, I'm going to get a formula that uses green and magenta and a green shade yellow with opaque white. So I got two different formulas. So are those really the same color? Well, just because we get different formulas doesn't mean that we need to be scared. Should the formulas be exactly the same? Well, two different formulas can produce the same visual color and the same LAB values, right? There's more than one way to make any color, right? And there's more than one combination of base colors that could be used to do that. However, that's true that those two formulas can produce the same visual color and the same LAB values, but only under the same conditions. The same illuminant or light source, right? And the same observer value. And that could be kind of scary, right? Because if those things aren't the same, we're going to have a problem. So let's dig into the problem a little bit deeper. So if we look again at our spectral match, here we have two reflectance curves. And the red reflectance curve is actually the color I'm trying to produce. The blue reflectance curve is actually my match. And you can see with my spectral match, I get that formula generated a curve that's the same basic shape. It's got the same hills and valleys, if you will, in it. It's not a perfect match, but it's very close. If I look at my LAB match, again, the red reflectance curve is the target I'm trying to hit, and that blue reflectance curve is the match. Now, there's a lot of difference in those curves, a lot of variation, right? Which is going to ultimately lead to a problem. So we'll continue to dive into that. So looking just at the LAB match, here's the curve. This is visually then what in the software we're calculating and what you would expect to achieve if you went and mixed up that ink. That in D52 degrees, you got a pretty good match. Well, that makes sense because, of course, we entered the LAB data for the D52 degrees. And so the target, essentially, that the software algorithms are trying to match are driving it to match the LAB of D52 degrees. And it will do that well. It can't match anymore because it doesn't have anything more to match to. So we kind of get whatever happens when we start looking at other light sources. And so that exact same match under fluorescent light, F2, 2 degrees, you can see we get a very, very poor match. And it's not any better when we look at it under incandescent light. And so what we're really talking about here is that when we do a match using LAB data rather than spectral data, we're pretty much guaranteeing another monster's on his way, and that monster's name is metamerism. Metamerism is a beast to deal with and something you have to face, right? So how do we deal with that metamerism monster? Well, first let's define what that means. When we say metamerism, we are talking about two objects that match under one set of conditions, but do not match if I go to another set of conditions. And most commonly, we're talking about a changing in lighting or illumination. In other words, hey, if I go in my light booth and turn on my D50 light, these two look almost identical. Maybe I can see a little color difference, but it's a good match. Now I change my light to fluorescent, and suddenly they don't look good anymore. Or I walk out, I take it out of the light booth and look at it just in the room I'm sitting in whatever lighting, and it doesn't look good there. Right? That's the most common way, but sometimes we see metamerism from other conditions, changing your viewing angle. It might look good at one angle and not at another, but most commonly it's lighting or illumination that we're fighting there. And again, this is coming at us because of us matching to an LAB rather than to spectral. So why does it occur? Typically, it's due to a mismatch in the chemical makeup of the coloring materials, right? So in the world of ink, in other words, we're talking about different base inks. Maybe both formulas are using the same colorants, right? And they vary slightly, but if the chemical makeup, if I have one yellow ink and you have a different yellow ink and they're made from different yellow pigments, this goes all the way back to the raw coloring material, right? If they're chemically different, then there's the chance that that's going to introduce metamerism to us. It's easily identified in reflectance curves that cross. So we go back to our reflectance curve from LAB, and we see again that those reflectance curves are crossing. I often say if you find space between the curves, like this area between the red and the blue curves in either direction, that's an indication that you're going to have some extreme or have some metamerism occurring. And again, the key here is with LAB, we have to synthesize, if you will, or approximate what a reflectance curve would be that could yield the proper LAB values in order to do our matching. And that's true of anyone. There's no way to back calculate 31 points of reflectance data from 3 points of LAB data. The calculations exist, of course, to go from reflectance to LAB. You can't go the other direction, and that introduces us into this problem over and over. So it can be, unfortunately, part of the reason we decided to call Metamerism the Monster today, not only because it's Halloween and we're trying to have a little fun, but also because it can be like a monster that's under some kid's bed, right? You don't realize that they don't realize it's there. Parents don't realize it's there. Only the kids can see it or whatever. But the reality is, you might not recognize it because your match, if you're only looking under one light source and you're only looking under the light source that you got the LAB data for, everything looks good. You might have a good match that looks good. Then the problem is your customer gets it, and they end up using it and seeing it in more than one light source, and suddenly this monster jumps out from under the bed, and you have a problem. So to recap, the things we want to focus on to get us out of these difficult situations is, one, ensure that we have accurate representation of the target color via spectral data. Whether that's you have a physical sample you can measure with a spectrophotometer, you can recall it from a database, it comes from Pantone Live. Some way we have to get spectral data. We realize there are situations where that's simply not possible. LAB is the only thing you can get. So a quick recommendation there. Then match the LAB data, realize and communicate that the match you're going to generate is only going to be valid for this one light source. And then hopefully you can work with your customer to get them to approve that color under that light source and others, right? And if they can say, yes, we're good with this color, we will sign off on this as our standard going forward. Now you have spectral data that you can use to manage the color going forward. So it's key to try and drive that to spectral data. 2 is generate formulas that match across the required conditions. Again, if I've got multiple light sources, and even when customers don't specify more than one, you know that they're going to see it under multiples, right? Let's just think about anything we're printing that's going into a package. It's got to look good under lighting that's sitting in a store, which could be any kind of lighting. Nowadays it's LEDs or fluorescence or whatever, right? Most people want their color to look good everywhere. And third, to avoid the Metamerism monster, you need to assess your reflectance curves and look at delta values under multiple illuminants. That will help you identify if metamerism is going to be a problem. Because even when I have spectral data to match to, I still need to be concerned about metamerism. Anyone who's used formulation software, you've seen that they will give you multiple answers to the same question, what's the formula for this color? And they might predict, hey, here's 5 different formulas that will all have a delta E of 0. Well, how do I know which one to pick? Looking at reflectance curves might help you eliminate any that might be introducing metamerism, right? Or by looking at delta values under multiple illuminants, you can help to select the best formula that's going to match not only under your primary light, but again, under any light source that you might ultimately need to go to. All right, so we've gone to 15 minutes on a 10-minute webinar. Thank you for staying with us. We've got some information here on the screen for places you can go to get more info from our website. Call us, follow us on social media and so forth. This webinar, as Robert indicated, will be provided to you electronically, so you can view it later or share it with your friends, colleagues, and so forth. If anyone has any questions, I'd be more than happy to answer them at this point. Please feel free to.
We'll give everyone 30 seconds or so. It looks like some questions are coming in right now.
Yep. First question, great. About, does the use of CXF data provide spectral data rather than just LAB? Tricky question. It can be either or both. It depends on the source of the CXF data. So for the most part, if someone provides you with a CXF file, and for those of you who don't know, CXF stands for Color Exchange Format. It's an ISO-defined format for sharing color data, but it has the capability to contain only LAB data or LAB and reflectance data. If it has reflectance data in it, it will create your standard as a reflectance measurement, and you'll be good. If it only has LAB data, it's going to create it as LAB only. So the question almost has to go back to the source of the CXF file to find out, right, where did that come from? Because you can get a CXF file, for example, out of some publishing kind of software that you're working from, right? So there, that's only going to generate LAB data, right? I don't remember if you can do it directly out of Photoshop or if it's related plugins, but there's a way you could get it from there, and then it's not going to have necessarily have reflectance data in it. It may only have the LAB data. So you really want to know where the source of it. And honestly, a CXF file can actually be opened up in a Word, like a notepad or editor or something like that, and where you can actually look at it and see what kind of data it contains. Okay, great question. All right. See several other questions, but they are indeed going to be rather lengthy, as one person noted in our response. We will get you a response to these questions, Robert. And if you have any more, please continue to enter them. We will reach out to you to help you with whatever questions you've posted. Thank you all again. Enjoy your day, and we look forward to hearing from you soon. Thanks.
Thank you.